Today, I've got a double dose of reviews for you. The first movie I'm going to talk about is probably fiction, and the other one is Frozen 2. Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all-new Talkin Movies Double Feature. As always, I'm your host, the real Geno Reynolds, and today, the two movies we're going to be talking about is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood and Frozen 2. I will warn you, there's probably going to be spoilers in these reviews. If you don't want anything spoiled, I will say this, and I'll get into the reasons in the reviews, but I do recommend A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and for me, I don't recommend Frozen 2. But for its fans and the kids that like the first one, I'll definitely recommend it for them. The first movie I'm going to talk about is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is based on an article about an interview with Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. The reason I joked about it being fiction in the intro was because this one was inspired by a true story. You see, the journalist, they changed the name of the journalist in the movie, and I haven't read the article, so I can't really find what was true in this movie and what wasn't. Is it all just kind of based on a true story? It's one of those, right? Inspired by a true story. The main question everyone is going to have about this movie is, how was Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers? It's going to sound like I'm ripping on him, but I'm not, because I'll say this. You couldn't have found anybody better to play Fred Rogers. Tom Hanks is the best pick. So I'll say that. That being said, when Tom Hanks is playing real people, I find it hard to believe it. For him to be lost in the role, because I still see Tom Hanks playing the role. Now, I see Tom Hanks playing the role really well, but I just still see Tom Hanks playing the role. That is not putting him down. I still thought he did a great job in this. It's just that I didn't feel like he was... I mean, I was happy he wasn't like trying to like do an impersonation of Fred Rogers or something like that, or a caricature. He was just Tom Hanks playing Fred Rogers, and it worked very well. So, it was a good performance, but he didn't lose himself in the role. I mean, the only thing, I can't imagine who else would have played the role. He did a really good job, so I did like that. One thing I really loved about this movie was how they bookended, and then also for some of the parts of the movie to set up the story. They kind of used an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood where Mr. Rogers is setting up, you want to meet my new neighbor, and then he'll show a picture of our reporter. So I really liked that, and it bookended the movie, and there was a couple times during the movie that they used it to set up certain scenes. And then also, the thing I think I liked the most about this movie was the transitions. Anytime they would go to like different locations, whether it be in Pennsylvania or in New York or whatever, they would use like models from the show or like the show. And like if a plane would fly, it'd be a toy plane flying, and they would do that, and I thought that was really cool, and they did it a lot. Anytime they went somewhere, it was here's that building, and it's all models and everything. So that was kind of cool. I really liked that. The main story itself, the whole point of this story is the movie's telling a story that is basically the lessons that Mr. Rogers taught children on his show, about being kind to each other, forgiving each other, being able to deal with life's problems, seeing the good from bad, just all sorts of the different lessons that Mr. Rogers taught. This movie used as its plot, and that worked really well for me too. One thing that I won't say this didn't work for me, but one thing that it was just strange, because again, I know this was based on an article and not like a biopic, because I mean, come on, there's already that documentary that came out not too long ago that was pretty good about Fred Rogers, so you don't really need a biopic. But Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers is almost like the supporting character in a movie about Mr. Rogers. Even though, again, the main story is about this reporter coming to terms with like his past and everything. So the reporter's kind of the main character, and Fred Rogers is the supporting character. Again, they didn't really bother me, but the thing that really, it didn't take me out of the movie and didn't ruin the movie for me, but there was a dream sequence, and there was a few different parts of it, but one of the parts like had our reporter in the land of make-believe, like in the castle and everything. And in a movie that, for the most part, was grounded in reality, going to that dream sequence just kind of took me out of it for a bit. But it gets its foothold, and the story they're telling in this dream sequence is very relevant to the overall story, so it fits. It just kind of took me out of the movie for a bit. But all in all, this is still a really good movie. I'd still love to know what's real and what's not. But the story is simple. And again, it's about the simple lessons that Fred Rogers was teaching on his show. And they used that to kind of tell the plot of the story and based it on this article, which I couldn't find the article. I will eventually probably find it and read it. But I do recommend this movie. The next movie we're going to talk about, of course, is the return of Anna, Elsa, and company in Frozen 2. Look, I'll set this movie up before I tear it down. No, I'm kidding. The movie is, there's a few different stories going on. Elsa's hearing voices that's telling her to go to this enchanted forest that their parents told them about when they were kids. Kristoff wants to propose to Anna, but Anna thinks they might be growing apart because he's trying to propose and he's coming off bad and he's saying a lot of stupid stuff. You've seen that story before, and honestly, that was kind of my biggest problem with this movie. I'll talk about that in a bit. Olaf is learning now. He's learning a lot of life lessons, and that's kind of his plot. You've pretty much seen the proposal story before. It's just guy say stupid stuff and woman thinks they're breaking up kind of thing. You've seen it. The stuff with Olaf for me was probably the most interesting, even though it wasn't that great. Even though, that being said, he did have the two best scenes in the movie. One of them was about in the middle, and the other one was the after credit scene, because they kind of both played off the same joke. And that joke, again, I told you there's going to be spoilers in this. The joke is that the one halfway through the movie, he's explaining to some people the events of the first film. He's just kind of acting it out. And then the after credit scene, he's telling someone the events of this movie and acting it out. And it's funny because it's Olaf. So really, there's still nothing really original here. But what really just drove me nuts right from the beginning was Elsa's story. Okay, the story they're telling about this enchanted land, this enchanted forest, was there's 4 elements: fire, wind, water, earth, and the people in this land could control those elements. You kind of see where I'm going with this. I was just like, they're not doing this, are they? And while they don't exactly do it, this whole Elsa's whole story feels like Avatar: The Last Airbender, because there's a 5th element. It's like, gee, I wonder who the 5th element is. And granted, while it's not Elsa being able to control the other elements, she's the one that brings them together. And I'm like, oh, she's the Avatar. She's Aang, right? And that's exactly what they're doing. And I'm just like, man, are we really borrowing this? That was one of my biggest fears of this movie, was that, well, I know this movie wasn't exactly rushed, but the first one came out in 2013, I think. Yeah, 2013. So they've had years to make it, but they've had that many years to make it. There should have been more of an original story. That was my biggest gripe with this, is like nothing felt really original. Yeah, it looks nice and everything, but it didn't really look any better than the other one. When it comes to the songs, of course, they were going to try to create a new Let It Go. And really, there is one that's probably supposed to be the new Let It Go. But there's two songs in there that could be seen as the new Let It Go, even though neither of them are really any better. But I can see people saying that's the new Let It Go. So there's that. Oh, and one thing that's driving me nuts about some of these Disney movies now, why can't we have villains anymore? Yeah, there's people that are kind of the quote unquote bad guys for a time in this movie, but kind of like Maleficent, it's like they're only bad for a while, but then we're all misunderstood. And yes, in the past that they're trying to discover, because they have to figure out what happened in the past to fix the now. Yeah, there was a villain then, but it was like that's that. There's no real villain here. Um, and like Wreck-It Ralph did that. There was no real villain in the second Wreck-It Ralph. And it seems like Disney movies feel like we can't have villains anymore. You know who the characters that are the ones you want to watch in these Disney movies? It's the villains, man. A good guy is only as good as their villain, and this one didn't really have a villain. And that was kind of sad. And again, there was nothing really that original in this movie. And I know I'm cutting this short, but again, I think this movie will satisfy its fans, and it'll satisfy the kids that they're going to want to have all the toys with all of Elsa's new dresses. But for me, it didn't really offer anything new. Oh, and the movie didn't take any risks. I know this is a PG movie that's got to satisfy the kids, but this movie does the cardinal sin of faking risk. A couple characters die, and of course they're going to come back, and they're going to come back, and it's of course they telegraph it, and it's like, yeah, of course they're not going to take risks because they got toys to sell this Christmas. So yeah, the movie for me, it didn't really do anything. I would never watch this one again. And honestly, I haven't really gone back and watched the first one, and I liked it. So yeah, this one did nothing for me, but that being said, this movie is not for me. So my opinion really doesn't matter that much. If the fans like it, if the kids that like the first one like it, I understand, and that's cool with me. It's not a terrible movie. It's just, it didn't offer me anything new, and that was kind of the thing I was afraid of. That's going to be all for this edition of the Talkin Movies Double Feature. If you have anything to say about A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood or Frozen 2, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Till next time, I'm your host, the real Geno Reynolds. See you later.